We are about to start with just some introductions. I'll start by just talking about myself for a second. So I'm Alicia Olivo. I use she, her pronouns. I am the consultant of special projects for Benvenuti Arts. I've been with BA for about 5 going on 6 years, which is exciting. And I've transitioned from being a part-time administrative assistant to my current role as a consultant for this consultancy, working with various arts nonprofits across the country. I'm based in Houston, Texas. I will do a land acknowledgement after we do introductions very briefly. Outside of BA work, I am also a playwright, producer, director here in Houston, Texas, developing just new works that I've written in the past, as well as helping others create and bring to life their new work. Additionally, I am an Artist Ink Express facilitator, which is an artist professional development program here in the Mid-America region, which is run by Mid-America Arts Alliance. And I'm very excited to have this conversation with Erika today. I'm going to read your introduction. Erika Atkins is a strategic leader and organizational consultant with over 20 years of experience driving impact and operational excellence within the nonprofit and creative sectors. After 6 years as the executive director of the Bloomingdale School of Music, including leading the organization through the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, she is now transitioning out of that role, having overseen large-scale strategic initiatives, including the Roadmap 2027 plan and a $1.5 million in capital projects. Through her firm, Atkins Impact Strategies, Erika specializes in infrastructure optimization, strategic planning, and equitable leadership for diverse organizations. Her current work includes partnering with Dream Machine's Exodus Leadership Forum and developing multi-year strategic plans for organizations like Project Camp. A lifelong artist and advocate, Erika holds an MS in Arts Administration from Drexel University and serves on the boards of the Inheritance Theater Project and Newport Film. Wonderful. For folks who are joining us on the call, please feel if you want to drop an introduction in the chat, maybe name, pronouns, if you're representing an org, and where you're calling in from. That would be awesome. I will also be doing a brief land acknowledgement, as I am based in the lands colonially known as Houston, Texas, which are the lands of the Coahuiltecan, Karankawa, Sana, Ishak, Esokna, and Akokisa peoples. We really encourage you at the top of our calls just to check out this website, native-land.ca. I'm sending it in the chat. If you want to include that as well in your introduction of where you're calling in from, this website gives you a list of Indigenous folks, First Nations, tribes, and other groups, however they may self-identify, and where their historic lands or current lands are in relation to where you're based. And so just kind of as an overview of what we'll be doing today, we'll be talking about strategic planning. BA conversations are pretty casual, they're pretty free form. Erika and I have like a set of guidepost questions that we'll be returning to and coming through, but we do welcome questions in the chat, and we'll have about, we'll use the last 10 minutes of our time together to take questions from the group. And yeah, we're really excited to talk about this big thing, strategic planning, which is can mean so many different things for so many different people. And so I think the first question to kick off our conversation, Erika, is going to be, how would you define a strategic plan, and what are the advantages and disadvantages that you see for arts orgs?
Yeah, so I think the simplest version of looking at what a strategic plan is, it's a defined set of goals or aspirations that an organization is moving towards under a set period of time. So you could do a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, depending on where your organization is and what makes the most sense to you. You can also have a plan that's more of a vision plan. It's more about working towards who you want to be and setting objective to do that. Or you could do a little bit more of a traditional strategic plan where it's very like, we are going to have 15 new partners in 4 years. And the way we are going to do that is like XYZ, or some kind of like blend in between, right? I think it's just really important to know where your organization is and what makes sense. When I think about the pros and cons at the moment of a strategic plan, obviously I know a reason why a lot of people shy away from them is everything changing so rapidly at the moment for nonprofits and arts organizations. And it's quite possible you may make a strategic plan and then have to like cycle things out or shift things around. I'm actually, even as I transition out of an organization, going through that right now. But what I think is a huge pro is that I think it is better to have a North Star and to know what you're prioritizing or deprioritizing than to be scrambling nothing, right? So you have an idea of what you were working towards 2 years ago. You may look and say, nobody's funding that anymore. And then you can make like a strategic choice of, all right, so we're going to pause that. We're going to put it on hold. We're going to deprioritize it until the funding comes back, or someone decides that they are interested. Like you can do that as opposed to just it all being reactive and not having a map to be proactive. That's what I think of in terms of the pros and cons.
Yeah, we were chatting before our call together right now, and the way I think when earlier in starting working in arts management, I definitely would hear the word strategic planning and would think like, oh, we're gonna invest all this time in figuring out where exactly we want to go as an organization, and that is going to change. I think I came in learning about that just in a much more rigid manner. And so over the past few years, what I've really seen, and I see some folks in the audience who are clients of ours, and other folks that I don't know off the top of my head, and that's really exciting as well. But something that I like to kind of reemphasize to folks when we're working, not just for strategic planning, but for like budgets, your seasons, honestly, things like that. It's really emphasizing that it's a map more than anything, right? Just kind of like how this conversation is we have our guideposts, but might go here and might go there. Really retaining that flexibility to keep ourselves nimble in changing times. I think that's a key learning that I've gained over the years around this.
And I would also add on to that, when you know times are hectic, especially if you're entering a more hectic time, choose a shorter planning period, right? That you're like, okay, well, what do we really need to get us through? Or what do we need to move towards in the next 2 years? No one ever said you have to do a 5-year plan or that you have to do some like massive 6-year plan, right? You can choose shorter time periods to be able to move you through the current moment, so that you don't necessarily feel like I spent all this time putting all this work into something that isn't even relevant 4 years later, because it's another way that you can stay flexible.
Yeah, we're currently Benvenuti Arts is currently working on a strategic planning process for a client, and we're looking at a 3-year planning process. But the strategic plan that they had done a few years back had been, I believe, a 5-year overview of what they're looking at for their goals and etc. The question I have, I think, is it's kind of becoming it kind of folds into like the second question set of questions that I had, and so I'm going to ask those together. I'd love to know about what you consider to be the advantages and disadvantages of a strategic plan, slash who and which organizations do you consider a good fit for a strategic plan? Like when you're thinking of like an ideal, knowing that there's no ideals and everything's always not on fire necessarily, but everything's changing like the weather. What are some things that you would hope organization would have before they were ready to undertake that sort of process.
Yeah. You know, in addition to what I mentioned before, I would say another advantage of the strategic plan would be, as you just mentioned, when everything is shifting, if you have places to look that you're very clear on what you're working towards. It's like setting your own personal goals, right? If you know you really, really wanted to graduate college in 4 years. That was your ultimate big time goal. So no matter what life throws at you, maybe you meet the love of your life and you want to move to California and you got a surprise pregnancy, whatever. You're like, okay, but I wanted to graduate college in 4 years. How do I keep rearranging everything to make that happen? Or be like, you know what, maybe it's 5 years. That's okay. You know what I mean? It's the same thing for your organization, that you know that you have a goal to expand partnership, and no matter what gets thrown your way, you are going to expand partnership, and it may have to change over and over again what it looks like and how you achieve that and how you do outreach, but you are going to do that. And then, you know, like one thing that was really big for my organization, Bloomingdale, was online programming. And while it's still important for us and it's something we want to do, we're looking at where does that rank in terms of expanding partnership? Where do you want to put resources, et cetera, right? I think that's a great example of like, it, it helps you decide where you're going to focus also when resources get more scarce, but it can definitely feel like you're locked into a promise. And I think the way to always frame it is that you will always be able to be flexible around that. So when I think about who would be ready to do a strategic plan, I think I think that's such an interesting question because I think there are different moments why people would be ready to do one. Um, Sometimes new leadership is actually a great reason to do one, to help everybody focus and rally around what that new leader wants. Maybe they've been there for like a year, they've had enough time to take in what's happening, and now that's a good time to do a strategic plan. An organization that just had a big like windfall of resources or a lot of interest, that's a good time to do a strategic plan because you can be easily swayed by the interest of people who want to support you or join you. And you need to be clear on how you're moving forward so that you know who's coming in, who who maybe you want to like ask to wait on the sideline for a moment, who you are taking money from. Because if somebody's like, oh, we heard what you do, we love what you do, but we're going to give you all this money to do something that's totally not what you do. Like the fact that you know where you're moving helped you dictate that, and you understand what you're pivoting from if you choose to pivot to move towards where the funding resources are, right? Who else would I say would be good for a strategic plan? I love when I work with a group that's already done a theory of change because they have decided how their methodology and approaches will make the change they want to make. The question that they have is, what are our priorities right now? And what is the framework and time period that we want to do it in? But they've already decided they don't need to do the piece of the strategic plan. There's one client I worked with where we went over their theory of change again to make sure that it was still accurate, it was still good, it hadn't been worked on in a year. But they had put so much thought into it that when you were like, okay, well, what are the goals we're prioritizing right now? What are the different strategies we can use to make that happen? They were ready to go because they've been talking about that for years. So those are just some examples of people who I think are in a good place. If I would say you're not in a good place for a strategic plan, maybe the biggest thing I'm thinking of at the moment is like an organization with a level of change going on and on the leadership level. Like, so let's say, you know, your ED changing and your board president changing and like all this, like you guys need a second to all settle in and not throw a strategic planning process on top of that. I would maybe even say was going to say, I think an organization is facing a scarcity of resources. I think that can go either way. I think that a strategic plan can help you lock in on how to use the resources that you have. But I also think it can take a lot of energy away from the work you need to do to build up the resources that you need to feel a little bit more stable to think about what's next. So it depends on like how the mind of your leadership works, which one feels better for that. And then there's a question in the chat that I'm happy to talk about now. So the theory of change is more about the problem you're identifying, how you want to solve it, some strategies, practices you can use to solve it, and the world you hope you want to see. The strategic plan are the specific set of goals and strategies in a period of time that you will be using to solve it. So you can put a strategic plan like inside of a theory of change. Theory of change is more big picture, and strategic plan is more specific to this moment in this period of time. This is how we're going to move on that lane.
I think I have the question around, I think a question that I came up with is like what I'm going to do first, I'm going to like define really quickly like a rough outline of what a strategic plan is and like what the process is like. And I think the question I would ask you, Erika, then it would be like, you know, like, are there specific parts of a theory of change like process that like doesn't have? And so I'm going to go on a little monologue for a second, y'all. Please hold on. And so if you work with us, you'll hear we use the phrases operational planning and strategic planning often if you've worked with us in the past. A strategic plan, essentially, when we're talking about like the actual like steps that go into it, I'm pulling up a strategic plan, a sauna project that we have for one of our clients that I'm working on. Usually there's the way we define it, like 3 phases. There's a phase of internal evaluation. Then we have a community evaluation. And then we have the synthesis and the actual creation of a plan. And so what are happening in those different phases is that we are reviewing internal documents that already exist for the organization. We are doing the stakeholder analysis, which we're actually collaborating, working with Erika on for the specific client. And that includes like interviewing board members individually, interviewing staff members. At the beginning, we had a big kickoff day in person at this client in Pittsburgh, and we just met. By we, I mean Erika and Nathan. I was not there. I was just on the emails. And just meeting these people for the first time and doing exercises to kind of start to get a sense of what their opinions, what their thoughts on where the organization is and how they as individuals think the organization should be moving. And so we're gathering this information during the strategic planning process, not just stakeholders like board members, staff, maybe partners in the community that they have a long-standing relationship with, but also this specific client example that I'm talking about is a arts education center. And so they're working with schools to provide programming. They're also offering studio access to different individual artists in the city of Pittsburgh, et cetera. So they are those were folks that while we were interviewing board and staff, they were like identified like we need to reach out and talk to the students themselves, if they're adults or if they're students who are underage, talking to their parents and seeing how this client, I think we can talk about this, yeah. Pittsburgh Center for Arts and Media, I forgot that we had like a whole post on Instagram about them. And so we were asking folks via interviews or like Google forms. We also did like paper surveys that we're going to collect at the end of the month and just asking kind of the same questions we did on that kickoff day, like where do you think PCAM is now and where do you want to see it? Like you know, we would say, I think some of the questions were around like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, right? If there's a newspaper article, this was a really fun exercise that Erika did with the headlines, and encouraging people to write like headlines for if they saw PCAM in the news years from now. And so we're taking all of that qualitative and quantitative data, and we're basically gonna, after we collect all of it, we're going to be working to analyze it and creating reports and just kind of presenting it and saying like, okay, based on the responses, this is what is noted as like, y'all are doing excellent and you should keep doing. These were noted as like, these are excellent, but these could be improved, or things like, oh, you're missing this sort of programming that I see at other organizations, or that in general is not in the area. I'll be doing research into like just the general like landscape of the arts thing. So there's these pieces. There's the internal evaluation, of course, the community evaluation, and then the actual plan creation comes from kind of deciding, having the organization decide what are going to be the goals that they're going to be pursuing, breaking those down into pieces, and, you know, pulling in research, pulling in like, okay, you know, this organization that's similarly sized in this city that's very similar to Pittsburgh, this is how much they pay folks, or this is how many classes they offer, that sort of thing. And so that's kind of like a really rough overview of what a strategic plan is. When we talk about, BA talks about operational planning, it's basically the last part, like the research part maybe, but usually like we're actually having the goals already and breaking those down. We're not doing as much of the stakeholder analysis. And so it's kind of, and like often we've, like one of the clients that we worked with, who we're wrapping up an operations plan, I believe that they had already done a strategic plan with someone else and are bringing it to us. And so those are some kind of like rough definitions so we can work on while talking on this conversation. I think, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I would also add, some people will call an operation plan an implementation plan, or they'll call it a business plan, which is now that you've defined these goals and what you want to do. Sometimes people will cram, this is how we're going to get there. This is exactly how we're going to do it. They'll put that in the strategic plan. But, you know, we're talking a lot about staying flexible. So if you make that operation plan, that implementation plan, that business plan, that's where you can be flexible. And I often advise people to do that on an annual basis. And then I'm sure, Alicia, some of what you guys are doing is that you're looking at the budget and putting those hand in hand, right? That a lot of the very specific measurement that you're trying to reach will be defined through a budgeting process. And so you can have like a big picture outlook of what you're moving towards, but you can really look on an annual basis. And maybe you want to do the granular for a few years out, you need that, but looking on a smaller basis, okay, this is what we're doing this year, this is what we're doing this year, because we're all working towards this. I feel like that makes it feel a little less overwhelming.
I see a question in the chat from Gadaman. Are there different strategic plans, meaning different approaches / structures, maybe some that are unconventional?
I feel like a strategic plan is whatever you want it to be. Like at the end of the day, like some people have a little bit more of a vision plan, like I said before. So the vision plan is a little bit more about like, we are working towards bringing more people from the community into our organization. We are working toward expanding the range of people, having a more clear definition of the range of people we support. We are working towards building our capacity, right? Those are like vision versus like you can have a strategic plan that's like, we will be in 5 states by the end of 2029. Like you can have a very specific, literal kind of plan. It just depends on what you feel you need to be successful. I have one client pretty much made a vision plan with them. I have another client who said, if you don't put numbers in there, we will not hold ourselves accountable. And I said, cool. And so we went through, we did numbers, we put a 3-year, this is what you should be working on every year. We also then made a complementary budget narrative because they needed that to hold themselves accountable, as opposed to the other group was like, everything just turned upside down. We still want the strategic plan to keep us oriented. The vision is good. We'll revisit each thing on an annual basis. And I made them a metric tracking chart for they can use on an annual basis. So there's no set rule to what a strategic plan needs to be. Yeah, and for every goal, you have SMART goals, right? And for those who don't know what SMART is, sometimes the R means different things for different people, but it's a specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and time-sensitive. If you have a different thing for R, shout it out in the chat. I've seen different things for the R, you know, but essentially, yeah.
And where would you fit, just to circle back to that question around theory of change, out of all these pieces that you just described of a strategic plan, where would you fit theory of change? Or would that be similar to a vision plan?
I think it's more similar to a vision plan. And I personally actually consider it a little bit, I guess it is a kind of strategic plan. I actually think of it a little bit outside of a strategic plan and a really good precursor to one, because a vision plan isn't necessarily bound to a set period of time. Or a theory of change is not. It's like, this is how this organization functions, and that then the strategic plan can be added onto it. For that same client who said we need numbers, I actually, like I said, updated their theory of change with them. And then in their written strategic plan, it is, this is our theory of change. Here's like the most updated version. Now here's the strategic plan. Like, we put it all in one document so that they could move that way.
Sweet. Just to put a bow on this section of the conversation, I think the way I very quickly describe, at least for BA's definition of strategic planning versus operational planning, is that for the operational planning, it's like a strategic plan. We just don't talk to we don't talk to the board, we don't talk to the staff, we don't talk to the community. It's just the people that are in the organization already who have an idea of where to go. Sweet. Amazing. Clara Peterson asks, can you give an example of a theory of change? Is it just a statement or a paragraph?
Often you'll see, if you saw a template for a theory of change, it's usually, almost always every time I've seen it, it's like some kind of visual sidebar, or it is, you'll see like a list going down. So I'm gonna be very literal and read out loud someone theory of change. So you would say, long term, our impact is to reduce hunger. And then you would say, next step, you didn't say, and then the way that we do that is through working with local community organizations, through partnering with shelters, through going out in the street delivering food, through working with government to identify ways to, do this. Then next you would say, speaking of that, these are the people who would help us do this. And then say, and if we do these things, then the world we envision would be this. And that's the key part of a theory of change that I think is a little bit different from a strategic plan. It's more about, if we do these things, this is the world we will create. Where the strategic plan is more about in the next 3 years, we want to make sure that I'm trying to think in that same goal, what a focus of this. You might have 3 goals that would be we're going to try to reduce the amount of children experience hunger in school by 25%. We are going to partner with organizations to throw annual events, and we are going to, and then you have a 3rd goal, right? That would be the strategic plan, and that's how that would build onto the theory of change.
Yeah. Love that. I think just to very quickly answer Godman's question, and if folks have more questions, remember we're going to have a few minutes towards the end to do a Q&A, but just kind of to bring this home is that the one way of looking at operational operational being equivalent or similar to implementation. I think that's pretty accurate, right? It's what Erika just described. As an example, so Benvenuti Arts, we do these summer, you'll hear them like we do our like summer or fall or spring sessions, winter sessions, and these are kind of like short-term classes that we do. And on one of them that I worked on last summer was operational planning. And so what we were doing was literally breaking out the what is it? Like we had a little calendar like template and going like, okay, by quarter one, we're going to have ideally 1 to 2 new funders. Because the actual major goal for the 3 years would be something like we want to increase our budget from 200,000 to 500,000, right? And that would be about like what 100,000 each year. And it's the if you think about the vision, the theory of change as the thing that's driving the actual steps that you're going to take, the operational / implementation side is like the actual things that you're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis. Like if you had to do like a task list for yourself, you were like, I got to do this by then, boom, 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 boom. These are my SMART goals. I love, just because I know I'm being conscious of time, this conversation is going by so quickly, which is, I love it. And I love the engagement in the chat. Thank you so much, y'all. A question for you, Erika, is that because you've been on both sides, right? You've been on the being part of an organization that's undergoing change, this sort of strategic change, and also been working with folks as a consultant. What's I guess it's a twofold question. Feel free to answer both or one of them. What's something that you wish you had known during when you were doing the first strategic plan as part of the organization, whether it was BSM or someone else? And what's something you wish you would have known before your first strategic plan as a consultant, as the one helping guide the process?
Yeah, I'm thinking, because I definitely, the couple I've been involved with, one of the director, one of the executive director, and another one of the board member who was chair of the strategic planning committee, and then shifting over to also consulting. I mean, certainly over the past 10 years, can I account for the impact that political and social upheaval will have on this plan, right? I think I have that more in mind now than I did when, I was doing plans like 5 years ago, that like, oh yeah, like a change of federal government administration used to not move the needle quite as much on what was going to happen to your organization in terms of funding. Like everyone generally agreed it was a good idea to give to the arts. Now, how controversial the arts are, how progressive, like that may start to move the needle, like on what kind of funding, but the change had been so widespread and really like whiplash back and forth over the last 10 years in general. I don't think I could have seen that coming. Yeah, I couldn't have seen that coming. Like certainly when I made I think a great example, I'll say for Bloomingdale, a big part of the success of our plan hinged on expanding institutional giving. And then that has completely like just crumbled over the last few years. Now, another part of our plan was also to increase individual giving. And so there were already things inside of the plan that I could pivot and be like, okay, well, that part's more important, but that part doesn't go away. This goes up in priority. So yeah, I wish I would have thought more about how rapidly things can change, but a little bit of a human reaction to be like, it can't change that much again. We just went through that. Turns out wrong. Lesson learned. So now when I work with clients, I'm like, okay, we all know up and down. Like we've all been through the last decade together, right? Up and down, up and down, up and down. So how do you create a plan that can be flexible to all of those things? That's now how I operate as a consultant, and really ask the executive director and the staff and the stakeholders in the community to think about who are the people who you think are going to stick by you, like no matter what are relationships that are fragile, if you lose XYZ funding, what happens, like just really think about that.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's the it kind of like really underscores the importance of like setting time aside for these, if you're in a place to do so, like time to just kind of really review and interrogate like every single aspect of what your organization is doing. I know we have like a really from just based on the registration form, like a range of different kinds of arts groups that are in this call right now. And I noticed that a lot of them are based in the Northeast corridor, like from Pennsylvania up into New York. Erika, I'm totally not leading you with the question that we already discussed before this call, but if you had something to, a piece of a thought that you would like to offer for groups that are kind of in that part of the country, kind of on the upper East Coast, what's an offering for them that you would say in this call if they're considering strategic planning?
Yeah, so obviously, organizations in the Northeast corridor, there are just more cultural organizations. And that is going to affect how we are supported and who's supporting us. For example, I know of a large donor, who tries to give to more organizations across the United States. So it's like one New York organization is going to get it. And there's so many of us in New York City, and only one of us is going to get it. And then they're going to try to spread out across the other region. So there's so many of us packed in one region that it's like pretty competitive. And so one of the things I encourage people to think about in the strategic planning process is how can we better harness our collective power to support ourselves, because I think the reason why we know there's so many of us is because we serve these really large populations that have such varying needs, and no one organization can do it all. And so there's a whole bunch of different arts and cultural organizations and arts education organizations, et cetera, to try to do that work. But from a funder perspective, I do understand that they're like, well, we can only fund like 20 of you. And so we're kind of being stacked against each other. So how, when you're looking at strategic planning, can you lean on the fact that that is true to either one, figure out how to partner and collaborate to make the whole feel stronger? And I think that's more important than it ever was before. I think we all operated in silos a little bit for a long time. Or two, be really, really clear on what makes you different from everybody else, so that you're going for the right funders that actually fund the thing that's special about you. And again, what I found is once I made a strategic plan, I was able to communicate that way better in a grant. And I just looked at the plan and was like, who's funding this? And it made it way clearer who I should be going after. And the answer wasn't everybody. So those are just things I encourage people to think about in an area where it's already so packed.
And I'll say very quickly, I think there's as with Houston as an example, I'm seeing a lot of that sort of those conversations and pushes from local like art service organizations really trying to help facilitate, because same as every other part of the country, loss of institutional funding is real. There's this really excellent art service organization here in Houston. They were formerly known as the BIPOC Arts Network and Fund. They are now known as Houston in Color. And when I used to work with them, one of the pieces of conversation was like, well, when you don't have the money, right? When you're like an extremely small organization, like you're really working with like less than like 200K or what have you as a budget, how can we recognize one another? Like I've over the years have gone to seeing groups like, you know, who aren't even sharing necessarily like the same discipline or the same communities that they're serving or the same kinds of what is it, stories about specific groups of people, but they're like collaborating across this like giant metropolitan area. And that is like, that has been like the first step for them to understanding like, oh, that exactly what you described, Erika, like, oh, we have this that's unique, but also we have like an administrate, like we actually have a larger staff and we can help if we do like kind of like a quid pro quo, right? Like we do, they give us their venue for a bit, but we're also able to like say, okay, we're going to staff this thing in exchange, looking past those monetary exchanges. So even if you're not ready to do a strategic plan, I just want to like uplift the no unsiloing wherever you're living, wherever you're doing your work, and really being open to collaboration, because you'll see people who are like a Latina theater company that's now doing work in the Galveston for Juneteenth, helping uplift like the stories of Afro-Mexicans and what have you. You just don't know what's going to happen from those collaborations. That's a little off topic, but it's fun. Yeah, it's great.
While you're saying that, what I was thinking is, and the way that would have shown up in a strategic plan is like collaborate with other organizations to like lift and celebrate the BIPOC experience. Like that's how it would have, right? You don't know exactly what all the details are going to be, but you do know you want to be doing something in that realm. And that's how it would have been listed in a strategic plan.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. We are definitely still open to questions. I'm happy to go back to something else and just kind of, it's good to see you. I love seeing people on camera. You'll have a chance to connect with us, and like, you know, if you wanted to have like a introductory call or just have like a brief email exchange, like I'm very happy to be like, you know, if it's something I can answer in like a really brief email, I'm very happy, even if it's just getting resources out. Totally, that's what we're here for and what these BA conversations are for.